The Pali word for mind also means heart, which means that when we're training the citta, which is the Pali word, we're training both the heart and the mind. A lot of times the emphasis is on the mind in the sense that we're trying to figure things out, and that is an important part of the practice. I've heard some people say, you don't try to figure things out, just be with whatever comes up, say that it's like this, and that's supposed to be enough. That doesn't accomplish much of anything. You're trying to figure out why things are happening. That requires the mind, that requires your ability to think, to explore, to come up with hypotheses and then test them. And that is an important part of the practice. But the heart also has to be trained. We can see this in the Buddha's first instructions to his son, and how important it is to be honest. Of various precepts, the Buddha seems to emphasize the one on not lying the most. It's not just a head issue, being accurate and giving a report of what's happening, but it's also a heart issue, your integrity, your honesty. You have to bring that to the practice. Because if you're not honest, then your precepts are not honest, your concentration is not honest, your discernment is not honest. It's not going to get anywhere. And then building on that, the Buddha talks about many other qualities of the heart. He extols modesty, contentment, persistence, unburdensomeness. These are all qualities of the heart. We tend to think of someone being good-hearted as meaning that they're kind and gentle. And that is an important part of the heart as the Buddha is training it. Look at all the teachings on goodwill, compassion, empathetic joy. But the idea of being good-hearted sometimes seems to carry the connotations of being kind of weak. Whereas for the Buddha, a good heart is strong. As he said when he talked about his own awakening, he combined qualities of being heedful, ardent, and resolute. Heedful in the sense of seeing that there's danger, but it can be avoided by training the mind. It comes down to a desire for happiness, a desire not to be harmed, especially not to harm yourself, but at the same time, not harming yourself means not harming others. I was listening recently to a secular Buddhist saying the idea of harmlessness is kind of vague and unhelpful. He wanted more to see flourishing as the Buddhist virtue. But the Buddha is very precise in what it means to be harmless. You don't intentionally do anything that's going to injure others. No killing, no stealing, no illicit sex, no lying, no taking intoxicants. And this person was saying, well, what about the ripple effect of your actions down the line? Well, you can't be responsible for that. But you are responsible for the things that you do and say and think, and the things that you directly get others to do. And we are not to be totally harmless in the world, because it is impossible to live in the world and be totally harmless, but we try our best to be responsible for the areas where we can be harmless, so that we can get out. Buddha talks about Nibbana as being the unafflicted and the unafflictive, which means that when you find it, the happiness that's there doesn't harm you, doesn't harm anybody else. That's when you're totally harmless. And that's where we're aiming. So it's not a vague idea. The Buddha is very precise in what he means. And realize that if you're harmless in these ways, then you're not causing danger for anybody, not causing danger for yourself or the people around you. That's what it means to be heedful. Realizing that there are dangers in the world and dangers inside your own mind. The mind has its dangers for itself and for others, and we're learning how to minimize those dangers. We realize that it can be done. If we couldn't escape danger through our actions, there'd be no need to be heedful. So you work on being harmless. As for ardent, this is where you get the proper sense of the word heart. When you say you put your heart into doing this, not just kind to each other, but you really put your intention, full intention. You put your will into this, to do this well. Like you're sitting here right now. You're trying to keep the mind with one object, with the breath. And any thoughts that help in that, you try to develop, you try to encourage. Any thoughts that would put you someplace else, you try to abandon. You put your whole heart into this. But the Buddha uses the word citta here again. Not meaning that you're just thinking about it, but you're wholeheartedly doing it. As for resolution, the Buddha doesn't talk about this quality much. But it's your determination. Once you found something good, you're going to stick with it. This is the quality you need to get the mind into concentration. It's not that difficult to watch a breath or two. But if it's going to have an impact on the mind, you've got to stick with it. And if it's not working, this is where you bring in the ardency again. To figure out what's wrong and what you can do to improve the situation. But it's this stick-to-itiveness that's going to make the real difference in your practice. So as you're sitting and meditating, try to think of those qualities. Heedful, ardent, resolute, and bring them to your practice. So you're not defeated easily. When sleepiness comes on, drowsiness comes on, you don't just give in. You're trying to figure out, what can I do to raise the level of my energy? When the mind starts getting restless, you don't say, well, the meditation's not going well and you just might as well give up. You sit here and you figure out, when the mind is restless like this, what in there has an appeal? That sometimes the mind seems to be running on its own. And in a case like that, you say, well, I'm going to stay right here with the breath. As for the thoughts, they can run off on their own if they want, but I'm not going to follow them. And you are resolute in sticking with the breath. Even though the mind may be concerned about this, concerned about that, or at least one part of the mind. This is where it's really useful to have the sense of the mind as being like a committee. Not everybody is on board with their concentration sometimes. So any parts of the mind that are not on board, you say, well, they're not me, they're not mine. They're just there. Because sometimes you are dealing with the results of past karma, old habits that have been running through the mind for a long time. And they're not going to die down quickly. You can't just put an instant stop to them. But you can refuse to nourish them. It's in the nourishing right now that you get tied up with them, so they can run on their own as far as they're going to run. But you're going to be resolute in staying with the breath. Years back, I was leading a meditation group in a college back east, and they assigned us to a room that had a really loud clock. At the end of the first meditation, as soon as the students opened their eyes, everybody said, "That clock." And I had to point out to them that the clock didn't destroy their breath. The breath was still there, as much as it would have been without the clock. But there was that part of the mind that wanted to come in on everything around them. We just don't get involved in that. Let the clock do its clock thing. You do your meditation thing. You're trying to develop good qualities in the mind because you want to be able to use them in all situations. So whatever disturbances there are outside, you learn how to not pay them any attention. Whatever disturbances there are in the mind, just regard them as just another committee member or block of committee members. But they don't have to have control over everything. You hold on. You're resolute, you're ardent, and you do this because you're heedful. You realize that if you don't train the mind, it's going to get scattered all over the place, especially when things like aging, illness, and death come. It's only a trained mind that can handle these things and not suffer. So when you think about being good-hearted and training both the heart and the mind to be good, remember it's not just a matter of the Brahma-viharas, it's also a matter of the force of your will, your honesty, your integrity. That's the foundation of being heedful, ardent, and resolute. Putting your heart into this, that's how the heart gets trained. That's how the whole heart and mind get trained. Because the mind has to learn lessons from the heart in this way. And it's trying to figure things out. There are all kinds of things it can try to figure out. But here the desire of the heart is for true happiness. Happiness that's harmless, a happiness that's reliable. And you want to use your ingenuity in service of that. So it's always a matter of heart and mind together. And as you develop both sides, that's how your practice gets mature, well-rounded. A genuine basis for being in a state of well-being that is well-rounded as well.